Can you believe that we're coming into the 8th season?
No.
In season 7's intro, we talked about the fact that we are Trinitarian, that we're Calvinists, and that we believe that everyone is saved the same way. Abraham was saved the same way that I'm saved and you're saved. What other core issues do we stand by?
That, all the solas, because we recognize those as core hermeneutical principles. They're like signposts in the road.
You and I are both Sabbatarians. We both keep a kosher diet, and we celebrate the biblical festivals. People have said that we're part of the Hebrew roots movement. Other people have said we're part of the Messianic movement. I see that the idea of practice being different in all sorts of denominations, which is why I consider myself a non-denominational Christian.
If it's worthwhile if there's even a single person out there that hears a discussion and through our discussion the Holy Spirit quickens that person's heart on a specific topic, maybe helps them in a way that they've been wrestling with the word and trying to understand.
We have faith in Yeshua. We have faith in Jesus Christ. We're saved by faith alone, justified by faith alone. There's no work will save me.
I think we're gospel roots. We're gospel roots. In other words, we go back to the core promise of the gospel in the scriptures, and exemplified, like Paul says, in the promise, in your seed all the nations of the world will be blessed.
Here we go! Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. This is Messiah Matters number 357. I feel like it's Monday. My name is Caleb Haig.
I feel like I got hit by a semi-truck. I have symptoms, consistent with the
Delta.
I'm Rob Van Hoff. I don't know. Maybe it's the mute
now. I wonder if I should move my camera. Hang on. All right, there you go, people. You can tell it's a Monday to me. Look at my hair. Look at how bad that looks. Didn't even have time to do my hair for you guys. It's been a day and a half already. Torah Resource Institute started today, our fall 2021 quarter, but there's still time for you to sign up. So go to TorahResource.com right now and sign up for the classes that you want. And
we've got, I know some that are under my belt. We've got first year Greek.
Yes.
It's not too late to jump in.
Yep.
Second year Greek.
Yep.
You'd have to talk to me. So send Caleb a note or send me a note if you have some Greek under your belt and you want to join second year.
Judaisms.
Judaism's in the first century. Theological research and writing.
Right.
There's all sorts of great stuff. And then I know that between your dad and Ariel and Andre, we got a good buffet of options.
Yes, good. Yes, it is good. All right, so go sign up right now. Do it. You know you want to, and you should.
You know you want to.
You know you want to. All right. So I'm not going to lie to people. A lot of the time we come on
You're
here.
not? Oh.
We're fully prepared. We're fully ready. This week, not so much. Rob and I have really had no time to talk. In fact, this is the first time that we've talked. Coming on live is the first time that we've talked this week. And normally we have a planning session for our show and we talk about it, and then I start preparing different clips and stuff like that. That did not happen this week. And the reason why is because we have
over 50% of the time.
Over 60% of the time, it works every time. Okay, so the thing is that it was Yom Teruah. It was the Festival of Trumpets yesterday, and I had some. So I have some insights on this. I had a couple of revelations. When I say revelations, I'm not attempting to say that I was spoken to by God or anything directly. What I mean is that I had a couple of aha moments. I had a couple of the light bulbs go on above the head. Before I was
going to ask you about that because
it's
I
concerning.
Think that's why your hair is the way it is.
Exactly. Before I get into those, why don't you be a part of the conversation and tell us what your light bulb moments have been during this Yom Teruah? 253-465-3205. It's
Messiah Matters wants to hear from you. Leave us a comment, a question or two. Call 253-465-3205.
You can also send us an email, chegg at TorahResource.com. It's CHEGG at TorahResource.com. I already told you to go to Torah Resource and sign up. And if you haven't done that yet, then what are you waiting for? I told you to do it, so go do it now. You can also find
another benefit is not only the weekly parashah,
yes,
but you have an opportunity through the forums for your individual class as well as the forum for the weekly parashah,
right,
which is everybody, to interact with people from all over the world.
That's right.
And who are like-minded, who are meditating on the same scriptural passages and there for the same reasons. So
exactly. Find past episodes, archived episodes. I just realized that I've been inputting all of our timestamps to YouTube wrong. So at some point, I'm going to have to go back and change all those. Anyway, you can find them at messiahmatters.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Press the like button and the bell. The like button helps us, and subscribing helps us even more. So go do that now because, do that as soon as you're done signing up for classes. Do the signing up for classes first, then subscribe to our YouTube channel in that order. Okay. Let's talk. Let's talk about Yom Teruah. Here are my revelations. I don't like calling them right. Here are my light bulb moments from the
LBMs.
Yes, yes, exactly. So the other pastor at our congregation was teaching on Yom Teruah and made the comment, and this was like, that all of the 5 major high holy days in the Torah, which would be Passover, Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. All the 4 of them have events that we look back to. Yom Teruah is the only one that doesn't have an event that we look back to. Now, let me expand on that. Now, I wrote an article on this actually yesterday morning as I was pondering this concept. So if you'd like to read my article, you can go to growinginmessiah.com. That's my wife and my website, and it's posted there on the homepage. Anyway, so Passover looks back to the event of the Exodus, and it also looks obviously back to the death, resurrection, and ascension of the Messiah. Shavuot looks back to the giving of the Torah at Sinai, sanctification, right? And it also looks back at the, yeah, Mike in the chat room. Who is the other pastor? It's Mike, by the way. Okay, so Shavuot also looks back to the giving of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, right, in Acts 2. Then we move forward, and let's skip over Yom Teruah here for a few seconds. We'll go to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur looks back to the Mishkan and the temple service, and once a year, the priest would go in and give the sacrifice in the Holy of Holies. You'd take the blood in and sprinkle it on the Ark of the Covenant. So we're looking back to that event. And then, of course, Sukkot looks back to the wandering in the desert as the Israelites would live in sukkahs, right? Or in temporary huts. Okay. And it also, all of these look forward to as well. But what does Yom Teruah look back to? It doesn't look back to an event. And so what Mike argued was that it looks forward to the second coming of the Messiah. and we see this throughout the apostolic scriptures. I think it was 1 Thessalonians 3 specifically is the one that talks about the trumpet being blasted at the second coming. And so that was really kind of a interesting. The other thing that I realized is that we often say, well, you can't really celebrate the festivals because there's no temple, right? However, I don't think that's true anymore, and I'll tell you why. Because as covenant members, what is the requirement for a covenant member? Now, there is a time, the pilgrimage festivals, you would go up. Passover is the one where you would actually bring an offering, right? So Passover, you bring your lamb, you give it to the priest, he gives it back to you, you have a lamb. Okay, but if you look at Shavuot, if you look at Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, you'd bring an offering too. But if you're too far away, what do? You take the money that you would have spent on the offering, you buy whatever you want, right? And if you live outside of the land, then it gets even more tricky because really then you don't have to pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So in all of those, the individual doesn't bring an offering. The priest brings an offering, but we're not priests. So what is our obligation? Our obligation for, let's say, Yom Teruah is to hear this blast of the shofar and to be joyful. That's it. That's the obligation according to the Torah for someone who's not a priest. And therefore, as covenant members, we can fulfill our portion of that festival, even without a temple. Thoughts?
Nope.
Nope. I'm good. You're done.
I'm good.
All right. Fair enough.
Good. No, it's good food for thought.
Anyway, I was reminded also that the Lord is extremely faithful to his covenant. In fact, and we're going to talk a little bit more about covenant here in a few minutes, but I am more and more convinced that it's all about covenant, right? It's all about covenant. Love is bigger in the chat room says, but what about the releasing of servants? The 7th month is the head of the year, and where is Shemitah, sabbatical? Yeah, I'm not sure how that relates to what we were talking about.
Looking forward, maybe? Is that part of what they mean? I don't know. I'm not looking in the chat room.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have bond servants or slaves today, so you wouldn't release your servants anyway. Right? I mean, if you have an indentured slave in your house, then by all means, maybe you should let him go.
If we were in ancient Israel, and I mean, we see this in Jeremiah, right, where they released their slaves and then they went and grabbed them back, right? But if you were a slave and you knew you were coming into the Jubilee year, you would look forward all year long, right? I mean,
right.
You'd be looking forward to the Jubilee every day, maybe for many years. But once, back to what Mike's point was, when you hear that, the Yom Teruah blast, that's like we're here finally,
Yep.
Like it's a big mark. And so I think there would be anticipation all along, but then, it's like when they turn the lights out, maybe at a concert or something. I don't know.
So
it's the opposite.
Cecil in the chat room says, light bulb moment. The more I learn, the less I actually know. Oh, my word. So I decide I'm going to take some classes. I'm taking a class. And then I think to myself, before I jump into, like the hard classes, maybe I should take something that I'm really familiar with so that it'll be light and easy. Right. And that way, because my wife's, we got a growing family. Anyway, I got 3 kids running around already, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, point being, I decide I'm going to take an easy load. I'm only going to take one class. I'm going to take Intro to the Old Testament. I know the Old Testament pretty well, right? Not a problem. This will be a breeze. Dude, I am drowning in information. I still have to read like 100 pages this week. I'm just, And but I am learning a ton. It makes me realize I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. Why are you guys even listening to this show? Okay, anyway, let's move. Let's move on. Rob's got he's got the illness, whatever that illness may be. He's not going to show up on the numbers. I hope. We're going to keep him at home. But the point is that he's had a lot of time to sit and listen. And
Middle of the night when I cannot sleep.
And where does his listening go to? Jordan Peterson, of course. Jordan Peterson just had a new video. If you do not know who Jordan Peterson is, I will give you a very, very quick rundown. Jordan Peterson came to prominence recently at the University of Toronto because he was a psychologist professor, and a lot of people think that he's like uber religious. He's not. In fact, I think his newfound ideas of religion have come recently. With all that said, he pushed against a law that the Canadian government was trying to make about regulating speech, predominantly pronouns of people, and making employees of the university use specific pronouns. He pushed against mandatory
coerced speech. Yeah.
And he pushed against this, and this ignited him catapulted him into stardom among conservatives and those who are anti a bunch of stuff. The funny thing is that I think that Peterson is not necessarily the large conservative that a lot of people think that he is. I have read a significant portion of his book, the one I forget exactly what it's called, to be honest with you, but he gives some very good advice to people. Clean your room is one of them, to men, and basically I think that this just goes back to this. You're muted, brother.
Caleb translates that to clean your office.
Yes, well, obviously not. Me too. But the point is that Peterson is a brilliant mind who talks about psychology. Now, he had Dennis Prager on with Adam Correa, and Dennis Prager is now, I don't know Dennis Prager very well and his stuff. Am I right to understand that he is a Reformed Jew or a conservative Jew? Is he a conservative Jew? Once again, you're muted. I can't hear you.
I'm doing that just in case I have to clear my throat or something. I don't want to blow everybody away. I don't know if he would be Reform or conservative.
I know that he's not a believer. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and he's not what we would call Orthodox.
Oh, right. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Jordan Peterson and Dennis Prager are now talking about religion in the last half an hour of this 2-hour special. Rob is laying in bed listening to it, and a couple of things ding off in the
correction
in his ears.
On the couch.
Oh, sorry, on the couch. Yikes, brother. Anyway,
bed feels way too soft right now. I need something a little more firm.
Yikes, dude. Yikes. All right. Anyway, so that's the setup. Now you kind of know. And honestly, if you haven't watched Jordan Peterson, I think he's very fun to watch just because he is in a realm that I don't think you don't think of too many psychiatrists being like in the limelight and doing debates and stuff like that, but he's done well at it. Anyway, okay. So this is
so the reason this was interesting on my YouTube clickbait was I was like, you know what, that's interesting because Dennis Prager has said some things historically that I think misrepresent faith in Messiah, misrepresent, quote, Christianity.
Right.
And he has promoted something called Judaism as if it is the religion that goes all the way back to Moses. And that's always bothered me. And but you know what, for 20 years, whenever, have often listened to his radio show, and if I'm driving and catch an interview. So, I've known Dennis Prager for 20 years. But I haven't listened to him solidly, but I've been aware of him. He's been on my radar, and I've checked in with him time to time. But I've always had, from the get-go, I've been like, okay, how does he represent the gospel? Even though he doesn't believe it, does he represent it accurately? And because he says, he puts it on the table that clarity is one of his highest values. It's like he wants clarity. And so I've always said, okay, is he really
Does he practice what he preaches?
Does he practice what he preaches when he comes to this, or is he biased against the gospel?
Exactly.
I think he's biased against the gospel. With Peterson, similarly, he's been on the stage for the last 5 years or so, as Caleb said. But Peterson talks about religion, it's the same thing. He's coming from a framework of the psychological, psychoanalytic view of like Carl Jung, and
I think that the handicap that Peterson has is that he has never been in the space of religion in a deep, meaningful way. In other words, he's been so focused on it.
Well, if so, he doesn't disclose it.
It's out of his lane. No,
but there's a degree he doesn't disclose.
Okay, but that's fair. But at the same time, the way that he talks about religion, it to me says that he has not dived into faith in any way, shape, or form, like the way he has into psychology.
Oh, right.
So it's
a great example would be exactly. This is why, like, if someone wants to watch Peterson, I'll say, well, watch his stuff about free speech and how the left is going to try to control everybody.
I think his stuff on Nazi Germany is fantastic.
Yeah, and his stuff on totalitarianism and his stuff on religion, I'm
misses the mark.
Don't put a lot into that.
But the reason that Peterson does so well in his studies on Germany and some of the regimes like that is because he hypothesizes. I know that this isn't the point of the show, but he hypothesizes that most people today would become a Nazi if it happened again. And the reason why is because we as humans naturally want to be part of the in crowd.
Yeah. In a way, of the two, I think Peterson would be quicker to adopt or grasp the doctrine of total depravity before Prager would.
Absolutely. Okay.
Prager's going to be all free will. Man is good, and all you have to do is choose.
Yep. And we'll hear some of that right now. Let's listen to the first.
By the way, so Caleb, what was it? 7 a.m. I email you and say, "Hey, bud, here's a YouTube link."
I literally didn't even see it and listen to it until about 9 o'clock. So
I get an email back from Caleb says, "I'll grab some clips." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So this is it's more fresh on Caleb's mind than it is on mine. I've had maybe a couple more hours of
mulling it over. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Let's all listen to it fresh together. Here we go, guys.
And that is what gave us everything. Let's put it this way: no Torah. No Bible, no Christianity, no Islam. So in a sense, I got a better case for the Torah's divinity than anything else, because everything else is predicated on the divinity of the Torah.
Hang on, I want to stop right here already.
Yeah, go ahead. You first, and I have two. Okay.
So I tend to agree with him in the fact that the Torah is the benchmark by everything. It's the touchstone that everything else needs to be judged by. The problem is that he thinks that he's got a better handle on the Torah than, say, the Christians do. And in many ways, he might be right as we look at overall Christianity. This is actually one of the things that Dr. Betts, who I've spent a lot of time with recently, hits home on, is that Christianity has really dropped the ball in terms of the Old Testament, quote unquote. But the fact of the matter is that if we frame Christianity as with the Torah as the touchstone, then everything falls directly into place. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you for that. That's a really good point. One thing that he's kind of sweeping under the rug is if we go back 2,000 years, there still are Samaritans. Samaritans have a Torah of Moses.
Right.
And it's not the same Torah that Prager's talking about.
Right.
And for the Samaritans, they're going to say, yeah, the Torah is the foundation of everything. So they're going to agree on all these terms, but then all of a sudden Prager's going to have to go, oh, wait, what I mean by the Torah is the Davidic and prophetic tradition that came after it and is inseparable from it. And then you get into the scribes that transmit the Torah, and then you get into the differentiation between the Qumran Essene viewpoint versus the Pharisaic viewpoint. So
that's a really good point.
All this nuance.
Yeah.
Plug Judaism's first century. If you haven't done Caleb's Caleb's, what was that? Exhortation to go sign up, do it now.
Yeah, where are you at? Go. What are you doing?
The point
go sign
is, too,
up.
is though, is this acceptable? Because basically what they do is, here's a timeline of history. The Torah comes, then the New Testament. They skip the prophets and the writings and go, then the New Testament, and then is the Quran. Okay, so now you have this timeline. It's like, oh, okay, these all came later. Therefore, what's earlier is foundational. But that is an oversimplification. Because it makes it obscures the question from being asked, oh, is the Quran a revelation in continuity with everything that was prior? So obviously you can't do that. Dennis Prager cannot affirm the Quran as a revelation from God. He's unable to do that. And somewhere in this, I don't know if it's in a clip that we'll hear today, but Prager says, I do not believe in Jesus Christ. But Christians do the world a work of God by taking the Torah to the nations. That's his position. So anyway, I would say if we're going to use timeline, what we say is creator,
right,
fall,
right,
creator of man in God's image, the fall, and then the path of redemption.
Well, and then and then it starts instantaneously. Promise,
and so
covenant.
So this idea of a timeline and historical evolution of idea from Torah to the New Testament to the Quran, I reject that as a straw man thing. It's really unhelpful. It's not going to help you think clear. So it's against clarity. So it's against clarity, which is supposedly a value that Prager has.
So in the chat room, Love is Bigger is confused on how Prager connects the Torah to the Quran. That's quite simple, actually. The Islam suggests that they would say that the Torah is one of their holy books. It's not on par with the Quran, but it came first.
The Jews have corrupted it.
Yeah, the Jews have corrupted it.
The claim in the Muslim tradition is that it's corrupted. So is the New Testament.
But that's what they say came first, and then the New Testament, and then they say that the prophet who is greater than Moses is Muhammad, who comes and gives the final and pure and perfect testament. And so ultimately, the Islam, they actually lay claim to the Torah and to the New Testament, for that matter. In fact, when I the last time I debated, I shouldn't say debated. The last time I talked to a Muslim in depth was actually in a Fred Meyer book section as I was looking at Bibles. Nonetheless, he said, "Oh no, I accept the New Testament." I said, "Well,
no, you don't."
And he asked me who I thought Jesus was, and I said, "I think Jesus is God." He said, "Oh no, that's a problem." I said, "Well, it's not if you believe in the New Testament."
Good, well played. We know from the Dome of the Rock that I've been immersed in the inscriptions. I don't read Arabic, but inscriptions that are on the Dome of the Rock in the earliest strata. So we're talking the 7th century, 8th century. Because this is the context of the Jewish scribes in Tiberias, is this Muslim ruling the Holy Land. Well, the polemics in the inscriptions at the Dome of the Rock are not anti-Jewish, they're anti-Christian. They're saying, yes, Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, the Messiah, but God has no son. And that the Christians are mistaken, that he's not the son of God, that he died, and that he'll resurrect on the resurrection day, and that he's a prophet, right? So even in the one of the most, now it's not the most holy site in Islam, but it is a major holy site, is the temple, what we call the Temple Mount, right? The Dome of the Rock, is engraved in the actual architecture, is this messaging that why or how Islam claims Jesus as the Messiah, son of Mary,
right?
But rejects
his divinity.
But rejects the New Testament, right? So,
there's something else that we can see this. The same kind of perversion happens much more subtly but it happens even in, so for instance, we were talking about this at our church the other day. It happens in Mormonism, right? So the Mormons will say, "Oh yeah, no, we totally accept the Bible. We accept the Torah. We accept the Old Testament. We accept the New Testament." But then they say that there is a better testament. They say that the Book of Mormon is more legitimate than the Bible. And if you read Joseph Smith's notes on Matthew 5:17, he says that the Old Testament has been done away with.
Yeah,
So you have the same thing going on in Mormonism that you do in Islam, which is they say, "Oh no, we accept it, but it's corrupt. It's not good. So we have something better."
It's another gospel.
Yeah, it's another God. We have something better.
It's a yeah.
Okay, so let's keep going.
Do you know Muhammad fasted on Yom Kippur?
Okay, so then you make a case, in some sense, I would say an implicit case, that anti-Semitism, for example, is a marker of deviation from the path of the Torah, but the path that runs from the Torah through Christianity and through Islam as well? I mean, because your point is it's the fundamental text out of which these other systems grew.
Anti-Semitism is ultimately the hatred of the Jews for bringing a judging God into the world. People don't want to be judged.
Hang on.
Well, that's understandable, that people, although the problem is if you dispense.
I love that comment. You can hear the wheels turning in Peterson's mind. There's this long pause, and he goes, "Yeah, that's understandable." Like, no one wants to be judged. Hang on, let's listen to it.
People don't want to be judged.
Pause.
Well, that's understandable, that people, although the problem is if you dispense with judgment, you also dispense with value, and you dispense with...
Right. It's a big problem. That's why I've been very annoyed.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
It is. I tell my Christian friends, and you don't get a more pro-Christian, non-Christian than me in contemporary life, but I tell them you blew it with just talking about God as love. It's not. Yeah,
well, Carl Jung said something interesting about that, because the Christ...
Hang on just a sec. I want to stop here, and the reason why is because I think Prager actually hits the nail on the head with something here. One of the reasons that you have progressive Christianity today and such liberal Christianity today, when you look at things like, what is it, the United Methodist, or when you look at the Lutheran, the modern, I don't even know what denomination of Lutheran it is. They're ordaining LGBTQ, trans bishops now in the Lutheran Church. You got, all sorts of stuff. You got churches that are affirming children being trans. You got all this stuff going on.
But that is not unique to Christianity. You could find
I understand that, but
liberal Jewish communities that have exactly
the
same.
I completely agree with what you're saying. However, how do these denominations look at the Bible, say we believe in Jesus, read something like Revelation, where he comes with a sword and a two-edged sword and just slaughters, okay, and then say, well, we're gonna allow all these LGBTQ people to be not only in the community and members of the community and baptize them into the community, but we're going to let them be leadership in the community. How does that happen? I think that happens from a fundamental misunderstanding of biblical love. Biblical love always pushes a person towards Christ and the truth of the covenant. And the truth of the covenant is condemning. The covenant condemns.
If Prager, and this is my point back to clarity, I'm disappointed that Dennis Prager, and this is 20 years ago probably, I heard him say this on the radio. He said that he rejects in the New Testament where it says God is love. Almost the same thing. And it's a shorthand now. It's really quick for him to be able to, it's right there in his pocket to pull out whenever he wants to. And I think that it's disingenuous because if he was really about clarity, he would pause there and he would look at the context. And then if he saw Christians living contrary to that, he would say, he would tell Christians, look, I'm not a Christian, but if this is, look at the context where God is love, you have to understand love in terms of a condemnation of evil.
Yes.
Right? I mean, because the same passage from 1 John, where it says God is love twice, talks about Cain, who's a son of the evil one, who slaughtered his brother, and that you can't love God and hate, and that to abide in God's love is to abide in God. And so the context also is Yeshua's teaching, which they do talk about here, because Jordan Peterson, he has the higher voice, the higher, faster voice here, for those who don't know, where Prager has the deeper, richer voice. Peterson says one of his favorite passages is where they ask Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? Is there a hermeneutic that overrides all? And they agree, it's love God and love your neighbor. Love God with all your heart, soul, and strength. They don't actually pause enough for Prager to actually defend that. He has to accept it's funny here. Every time Peterson cites Jesus in this interview, Prager agrees with the teaching. But then Prager, when it comes to God is love, that's like a rock in his shoe. And he has failed to uphold his standard of seeking clarity, because if he did, he would read 1 John and he would understand that sin is one of the biggest issues. It's one of the most repeated words in 1 John, is the issue of sin and forgiveness.
Right.
And God doesn't tolerate sin. And it talks about lying versus truth. I mean, and also one other point, and then we move on, is defining anti-Semitism the way he does, that it's hatred of Jews for bringing a judgmental God into the world. I reject that, because Islam has a judgmental God.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's, I don't see that as getting any traction whatsoever.
I'm just going to let you go ahead.
I think in the first century, if there's any anti-Semitism, it was Romans who hated Christians. Why? Because the Christians were doing something that the Mediterranean synagogues were not doing,
right?
Which is telling the Romans that they were idolaters. It's the apostles that are going from synagogue to synagogue throughout the Mediterranean.
Right.
And what are they saying? Repent. Those are idols. Worship the true God. So what the hatred of the message of a judging God, if he's going to call that anti-Semitism, then anti-Semitism is hatred of the gospel.
Right.
That's my point.
What's interesting is that
I'm disappointed in Prager's lack of clarity here.
I've just read through the book of Ruth, okay, and it's interesting because you have the book of Judges, and all these people are doing what they think is right.
Boy, we should get that book out of the Bible. Judges.
Yeah, Judges.
Gosh.
But all these people
isn't there the book of love?
But actually, that's interesting that you say that, because Judges is juxtaposed to Ruth. In the beginning of Ruth, what does it say? It says during the time of the judges. So at the end of the Judges,
judged.
At the end of the Judges, it says, and everyone was doing what was right in their own eye.
And it's bad.
And it is bad. It's things are not going well.
That's a tie down throughout the book of Judges. He comes back over and over again.
I think he says it 4 times.
Yeah, each time it's worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, and then the Civil War happens right at the end of Judges. The dude cuts his concubine up into a bunch of pieces and sends her to the different tribes. And what happens? God, and it's interesting because in the book of Judges, who's one of the key figures in the book of Judges? The Holy Spirit, which is really, really interesting to me. But basically, the Holy Spirit then comes and says, no, this isn't working anymore. We're going to go and we're going to declare civil war against Benjamin, right? And so all the tribes come up and they slaughter the people of Benjamin. And this is how the book of Judges ends up kind of coming to a close, right? Okay, so then what happens?
You know what? Can I tell you a joke?
Okay.
When did the Moabites become so mean? I told my family this the other day, and there was no laughter. When did the Moabites become so mean?
Hey, I feel a dad joke coming on like nobody's business.
When they became ruthless.
Oh, dude.
When they became ruthless. Tell your kids that one. I made that up the other day. Now, maybe someone else has thought of that before, but... Ruth was the only thing.
So when did the Moabites become so bad? Is that
so mean, so horrible?
Okay.
When they became ruthless.
Oh boy!
See, Caleb's preparing to tell the joke. I'm
going to tell my teacher that one. because my teacher's probably he'll love anyway. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so the point here is then what happens at the end of Judges? We move into Ruth. What does it say? In the beginning of Ruth, it says during the time of the Judges. So what does it show us? It shows us that even though everyone is doing, like, it's not a blanket statement, there are still people who are doing what is right in the sight of the Lord. And here's one of the really hard pills to swallow, is that Ruth, she needs a kinsman redeemer. Why? Because she's essentially, and I know this is going to perk some ears up, she's essentially allotted among the property of her dead husband. In other words, Boaz says, I can't be the kinsman redeemer unless I offer to this other guy first. And the other guy says, I don't want that property. So if I accept that property, I don't get my inheritance. So you take it. And then Boaz, he goes and he gets Ruth as a wife, but what else does he get? All of the property that comes along with her. And so we have this dichotomy in the book of Ruth, which is it shows God's love and his faithfulness to the covenant, even in times when the nation of Israel is at its worst. At the same time, it shows that God's law goes against our social acceptance right now. Anyway, okay. People love your joke, by the way. Victoria says COVID brain, Rob. Old joke, but just as good. Okay.
Other people have heard it then. That's good. Okay.
Okay. Let's keep going with, there's 38 seconds left. I don't know if there's anything left in this clip for us to really hear. Let's listen to it.
Presented in the Gospels is a figure, I suppose, particularly characterized for his mercy. But in the book of Revelation, he comes back as a judge, and virtually everyone fails the judgment. And Jung's comment was, any ideal is a judge. And so if you don't tell the whole story of so the question is, do we need ideals? And, I would say to some degree, part of the critique of the radical left is that ideals themselves are discriminatory. And there's actually truth in that ideals are discriminatory.
That's correct.
Okay, that's the end of it.
This is a good point and this is why I was intrigued to hear them talk about the Bible, is because Peterson's going to ask, he's going to challenge. So basically, he's like, if you don't tell the whole story, right? And he's saying, in other words, the passage, God is love, needs to be read in the context of the apostolic writings as a whole. And then you have Prager saying, absolutely, right? So now part of it, maybe he's saying absolutely to the idea of Carl Jung saying that every ideal has a judge. Maybe that's it. But he says it right in concert with the return of Christ in the book of Revelation as a judge. So anyway.
Okay, we got another clip here. Let's move on to the second clip.
There's a line of Christian thinking, I would say. And Northrop Frye, I think, a Canadian critic who wrote some great books on the Bible. You might be familiar with Frye. He wrote Words with Power, and there's a second volume, which I can't bring to mind at the moment. But he thought about the Torah as the story of the sequential rise and failure of the state, and that the New Testament was a consequence of the emergence of the idea that salvation was to be found through the individual and not through the state.
Okay, hang on just a sec. I want to stop right here. And the reason why is because I agree with what Peterson is saying in general, that the Torah is we're talking about a chosen people of God for a specific reason. What is that specific reason? It is to shine forth God's commands and his covenant, ultimately to shine forth who God is, right? And so this is what the nation of Israel is supposed to do. And we see a national level of what's going on in the Torah. However, even Paul talks about the remnant. From the very beginning, there's a remnant. So although we're looking at a national story play out about a national people, about a people group that God has chosen, ultimately, we still see the individualistic nature of the covenant. And we see that in Abraham. We see it in Moses. We see it in all of the patriarchs. We see it in King David. We see it in his son Solomon. Right. So I mean, he's right that it is a story about a national identity and a national covenant, but wrapped up in that is the individualistic covenant nature of God and his people.
Right. It's not one or the other. Now, I don't read Northrop Frye or anything like that, but it still is embedded on a continuum, that there's a continuum of evolutionary religious thought that starts with the Torah and ends with the Gospels. And so even Peterson suggesting this means Peterson's still coming from a worldview. And at some point he says the Old Testament. So Peterson still sees this as a one unit. And Prager, every time he gets a chance, needs to dislodge the gospel as part of the revelation.
Right.
So that's one of the things that's going on behind the scenes between their discussion.
All right, let's keep going.
And that seemed to me to be parallel with the tension in the Old Testament between between dogma and the prophets. So is it the case? And is there a difference between Judaism and Christianity with regards to the degree to which the state is seen as the primary mode of redemption? And is that tangled up with the conflict in Israel?
Well, there are a lot of issues that are entangled in one. First of all, you should know that salvation plays a minimal role in Judaism. And I know biblical Hebrew very well, and I cannot think of even the term salvation.
Let's think of a term, salvation, in the Hebrew language. Could it be Yeshua?
Yeah, this was a mouth drop moment. I'm like, he just said did he say expert or biblical Hebrew? He just touted his own skill.
Hang on.
Well, you should know that salvation well, there are a lot of issues that are entangled in one. First of all, you should know that salvation plays a minimal role in Judaism. And I know biblical Hebrew very well, and I cannot think of even the term salvation.
Okay, let me ask you, Caleb.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in your dad's or Andre's first year Hebrew class that gets to the end of the first year and probably doesn't know that word? I mean, am I being too?
This is an obvious. It's not that he doesn't know the word. I think this is an obvious.
He wants to differentiate as much as he can. He wants to downplay. Right. And this again, so I'm disappointed. Now, to be fair, Prager was a spontaneous question in front of him.
Yeah, but they keep talking about Jesus. Jesus is the English form of the Greek Jesus, which is the Greek form of Yeshua. I mean, come on. Yeah, are you telling me
save their people from their sin? Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know a word for salvation in Hebrew?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Yeah,
I like it. I did a Rob on the Rock video on this many months ago in Genesis 49, where Jacob is blessing his sons. All of a sudden he pauses and he says, "Oh Lord, I wait for your salvation."
Right.
And then he goes back to, and it's like, what's going on? Why would Jacob all of a sudden say, "Lord, I look and wait your salvation"? It, again, especially someone who's published a best-selling commentary on, I think he's done Genesis and Exodus so far. And he claims to know biblical Hebrew, which I don't doubt he has skill in biblical Hebrew, but I'm really disappointed again.
Well, so the chat room says that we just need to say, in terms of Prager's claim that he can't think of a biblical word for salvation.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, I want to attribute good intentions. You know what I mean? And so Peterson says, well, it's either incompetence or malevolence, and he's going to go to incompetence first. Like, you actually hit a person's level of incompetence, or they know that they're misleading, because I like Prager for a lot of other reasons.
Look, I'll tell you what. Hang on just a sec. Confession time, okay? Now, I screwed up from the pulpit the other day, and I said we were talking about the coming Messiah prophesied in the Tanakh. And I messed up and said that Christos. No, what did I say? Hang on. I said Kurios meant Christ in Greek. Okay. Now, Kurios does not mean Christ in Greek. It means Lord. And I know this. I've taken Rob's Greek class. I know Greek well enough to know that Kurios does not mean Christ in Greek. Right. But then somebody raised their hand and said, okay, so then what is Christos? Is that the Latin form of Christ? Now, because I'd already said Kurios, for some reason my brain did not compute what was happening. And I just said, Christos, yeah, that must be Latin. Yeah, it's Latin. It's the Latin form of Christ. So I understand people can screw up. That's a pretty big screw up, especially from the pulpit, right? And I had to correct that.
But imagine you're a New York Times bestseller for how many years, how many books, 30 years, and you're publishing a best-selling commentary on the Torah. And you're telling people that you are really good with biblical Hebrew. Okay, so you're not doing any of those things. You're doing your best to teach the Word of God. So I appreciate your
all I'm saying is that maybe Prager screwed up. Maybe he got off air and he said, "Of course, Yeshua. What was I thinking?"
Yeah, it could. I would like to grant him that.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going with his comments here.
Second,
it seems to be more like the promised land.
Well, Judaism is earthbound. There's a tremendous belief in the afterlife, but it plays minimal role in the Torah, because as soon as you start focusing on the afterlife, the fear is that you won't focus on this life. And Judaism.
Oh my goodness. Can we stop there? First of all, is he the final voice of what Judaism is? Because the ultra-Orthodox who read in Hebrew and the Aramaic rabbinic traditions and are immersed in the halakhic intensity of life believe in reincarnation.
Right.
The reason it's, quote, earthbound is because they want to fulfill, do as much tikkun olam as they can so that they don't come back as a weasel or a frog.
Right. Or the Passover fish. And that's what somebody in Israel said to me. You don't want to come back as the Passover fish.
Okay, so the point is, again, it's disingenuous because the heavy weight of the observant, which I would say, if I was going to just come as an outsider and say, where's the true Judaism? I wouldn't go to Prager.
Right.
I would go to the people that are living intentional communities with and are defending the bulk of the tradition, the bulk of the legal tradition. What are they saying? How do they represent their religion?
Right.
I wouldn't go to Prager.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Because as soon as you start focusing on the afterlife, the fear is that you won't focus on this life. And Judaism is extremely this life focused. Secondly, this is a very important point, and it is actually my biggest single reason for my adoration of the Torah and Judaism. It's the only religion that divides the world between good and evil and not between believer and non-believer.
Okay, this is totally untrue.
What? Well, wait a minute. Why? So he just says that his adoration of the Torah is due to a rational evaluation of its claims. So we have to remember that from being in Messiah, what we call this theologically is Prager's teaching the Bible from a perspective of an unregenerated heart.
Right.
He's no different than Nicodemus
before
Yeshua came to him.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Yeshua's gonna say things that's gonna make him stumble, and it's gonna undermine everything he's teaching. And the more he gives weight to Yeshua's words, the more he is gonna unravel the garment that he's covering himself with.
Yeah.
Called Judaism.
Okay, let's keep going.
Which is a newer, right? Just to clarify, when he's using this word Judaism, he's not talking about first century Pharisees. He's talking about a more
modern,
recent religion, that's developed since then.
So
Right. So that seems to me, from a psychological perspective, as a move towards a further abstraction.
Well, it's not a psychological issue; it's a moral issue.
That's fine.
In our view, God does not divide the world between Jew and non-Jew, or believer and non-believer. But
That's not true. Modern Judaism does divide the world between Jew and non-Jew. You have to become Jewish if you want to be in. So he's wrong on that. Hang on, let's listen again.
Issue.
That's fine.
In our view, God does not divide the world between Jew and non-Jew, or believer and non-believer, but between good people and bad people.
There is none good. There is none good, and that's what he's missing.
Exactly. Well, what Prager's presenting as what we believe is, he's saying this is what, quote, Judaism, capital J, believes, and it's not true. That maybe there are some Jews who believe that. He himself would be representative of those. But back again to those Jews that are Orthodox, they're going to divide the world into Jew and sons of Noah. And the sons of Noah are going to be judged by the 7 laws of Noah. And that is it. There is no becoming, no new birth, no becoming children of God. So yeah, this again was disappointing. And of course, I don't know if it was before the show or earlier in our show, I suggested to Caleb that Prager, of the two, Prager would be the last to accept the doctrine of total depravity, the doctrines of grace, because he's going to affirm free will, left and right, and rationality. I mean, his Bible commentary is called the Rational Bible. It's all about evaluating the claims and then coming to the right conclusion based on the claims. It's not new birth.
We got 22 seconds
Peterson,
left. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Well, Peterson would be way quicker. I think Peterson has a much lower view of humanity, as Caleb mentioned before. I mean, he talks about how, if it was today, if we were in Stalinist Russia, most people think, oh, I wouldn't become a bad guy. And they don't realize that they would, in fact, statistically, unless you are extremely ideologically oriented and motivated, you're going to join the crowd.
Let's listen to this last 22 seconds.
God sends good non-Jews to heaven and bad Jews to hell.
There is none good.
That's why Jews welcome converts but never sought them, because you don't have to be a Jew to be saved. But you do have to be a Muslim, and you do have to be a Christian.
Yeah, this is, honestly, he's definitely twisting this.
Yeah, and the fact that he says elsewhere that, I've interviewed rabbis and pastors and ministers and what do you call it, Catholic priests and Muslims for 30 years. Right. I'm like, and this is such a simplistic. Caleb, would a first-year theology student be able to write a paper with this type of? No,
of course not. You'd flunk.
No, it's like you'd flunk.
Yeah.
And so I respect Prager. He learned Russian. He went to Russia many times. He's very well educated on a lot of the same things that Peterson is educated on.
But it shows that he has if you're missing,
he's not born again.
He's
exactly. Clearly not born again.
If you're missing half the story, then you're skewed from the very beginning. That's all there is to it.
I do not. I put it in no uncertain terms. I do not want Prager's religion.
Right.
It's not. It has no. He keeps saying it's morality, like it's a moral religion. I think he's a good guy. I think he could.
There's none good.
What I mean is this. Let me clarify. Like if I had a Mormon neighbor, like I say, hey, can you feed my dog while I go on a road trip?
Right.
And I'm going to trust him with the key.
I get what you're saying.
That's what I mean.
I just had to throw that in there another time.
But when it comes to God's evaluation of the soul,
right,
there is none good. Only in Messiah. And we were not good, and we didn't become good, and then God loved us. This gets us back to our.
This makes me think of
Yom Teruah, right? That God, and like we read Genesis 21, God visited Sarah just as He promised. It's about God's timing. It's about His sovereign will and His big picture plan and His wisdom. his perfect counsel, not about our expectations and trying to work things out on our own. And so while he says, you know, he would say, oh, this is all New Testament stuff, I think it's right there in the Bible.
This show has reminded me that I miss my friend Mikhail. Buddy, send me some more Calvinistic memes. All right, brother. Good to talk to you. We will be back next week. I hope that this, that we've done something to spark something in your mind. I have already put in the show description a link to the full 2-hour conversation between Prager and Peterson if you'd like to watch that.
And Adam Carolla's in the earlier part.
You can also shoot us a voice message, 253-465-3205. You can send us an email, CHaig@TorahResource.com. Thank you so much, everybody. We will be back next week. We hope that this conversation has done at least one thing, and that is to glorify our great God and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah. Why? Because Messiah matters.